hopefully Flavia will be joining us here shortly, but we have a quorum either way. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would like to welcome everyone to a regularly scheduled city council meeting. Unfortunately, the mayor cannot join us tonight, so I'll be running the meeting. I believe there are agendas on the city's website for anybody who would like an agenda. And we are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll have Rich read the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball.
All right, and next is the disclosure of conflict of interest. Does anybody have a conflict with anything on the agenda tonight? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the manager's report. Steve?
Mr. Chairman, I have very little to report tonight. As you know, the work is going well on Main Street. I'm told that the contractor is about a month behind schedule at this point, but the city engineer is not concerned about that. He believes that other parts of the work are going to go more smoothly than the Main Street part has. Just as a point of curiosity, they encountered a clay conduit for power lines down the west side of Main Street, which they had a great deal of difficulty working around without breaking the conduit. So that slowed them down considerably, but they've managed to do that. And as you've all seen, that side of Main Street is filled in again. And they'll be paving that not too long from now. Then they're going to go to the east side of Main Street up against the curb, as they did on the west side. And it's going to leave a space in the middle that will not have been worked on, and they're going to do that last so that they can get to the sidewalks sooner rather than later. You'll be taking up the matter of the future use of this end, the Main Street end of Silver Street, later on in the meeting. And the contractor is still scheduled to be working at that intersection by July 29th. Legal counsel is with us tonight to help with that conversation, because it turns out that it's not as easy as just saying you want to do one thing or another. We have no COVID cases. We've been clear of that for a number of weeks now, and we're very pleased about that. I think everybody is beginning to relax a little bit, smile more, and interact a lot more than they have been over the past several months, and it's making for a happier workplace, and morale is up. That's probably all I want to report on tonight. You have a heavy agenda ahead of you.
All right. We're going to move on to approval of the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt?
So moved.
I'll second.
You can't.
I'll second.
I'm still a city councilor. I get to vote. I'm not the mayor. Sarah, can I get a roll call on approval of the consent agenda?
Councillor Morris?
Yes.
Councillor Oliveira? Sorry, she's not here yet.
Yeah.
Do we know what?
She's actually she needs the link, if you could send it to her. It expired. So
We go out this morning at like 9 o'clock.
Right. I'm forwarding her mine.
Okay.
okay.
Go
Well,
ahead, Sarah.
yeah.
Councillor Kleekpack?
Yep.
Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Foss?
Yes.
Councillor Frankie?
Yes.
Councillor Thomas?
Yes.
The vote is 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
All right. Moving on to unfinished business, and as Does somebody want to make a motion to read these things by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? No. Sarah, can I get a roll call?
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Clepack,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
All right. Ordinance 134-2021.
An ordinance providing for amending the animal control ordinance.
Move to adopt.
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion on this? Was that you raising your hand, Bill?
It is, yes. I was just going to make a suggestion. There's a minor typo, and I would suggest you add the letter S to the word interfere.
So that's just a Scribner's error, right, Bill? So Sarah can just update that without offering an amendment.
Yeah.
Just want to point it out.
Okay.
As long as everyone understands that, yes, you can go ahead and add an S.
Where is it, Bill?
The word interfere. I can't get the agenda up on my iPhone right here, so it just lost the connection. So, but the word interfere only appears once.
Okay.
And I also want to mention, if there's anyone from the public who wants to speak on any item, just use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, and we will bring you into the meeting so that you can make comment. And I'm going to wait a second. I don't see any hands going up. So unless the council has anything, we will move to a roll call.
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Okay, just came in. This is the roll call for which one?
for the animal control.
Ordinance.
Oh, yes.
Counselor Clepack,
Yeah.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Mr. Chair, before we move forward, I'd like to ask Sarah to change Councilor Oliveira's title.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing.
She can do it herself too.
Yeah.
It doesn't allow me to do it here.
The 3 little dots in the upper right-hand corner should, and then
Of your box.
of your box.
Got it.
There you go. On it.
All right, all set. Moving on to resolution 138-2021.
The resolution providing for establishing a safe zone, 19 Colby Street.
Move to adopt. Move to adopt.
Second.
Steve, where do we stand on this? What's going on with that property? Do we know?
Which property is that?
The manor, the one that this was dealing with.
We have confirmation that the manor has been sold, and it has been sold to members of the Termel family. The specific members of the family, I believe, live in Massachusetts, but they are related to the Termels that live here in Waterville.
And have they taken a position on this safe zone? And have we heard anything from the homeless shelter?
We reached out to the homeless shelter on Thursday or Friday last week, and I do not know if we've heard back from them. Sarah, do you know anything?
No, we haven't heard anything. They haven't contacted the clerk's office.
Councilor Green?
Well, I believe that the director of the homeless shelter has her hand up on the
There she
attendees.
is. Yep.
Sarah, can we bring Katie White in?
Yes.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
You,
Counselor Thomas and counselors, how can I help clarify
did this
any
request came
questions you
from
might have?
this request came from you, correct? From the homeless shelter?
That's correct.
Is there anything you want to say about why?
Is there
you made-
confusion about why we would request a safe zone?
Yes, I guess.
Sure. Sure. We serve approximately 10% of our guests are children under the age of 12. We do have a playground. We were largely unaware that we were entitled on the basis of that playground to apply for a safe zone status. But it is something that we absolutely importantly, because it's connected to Maine state legislation that has enhanced penalties for people who might wish to deal drugs. We feel we're a very safe place for children. We'd like to increase that level of safety. We are classed as a high barrier shelter, which means that we don't permit people who have certain convictions on their record to be guests at the shelter. But it is also the case that it's a congregate shelter that has a lot of adults and some of whom are substance users. So this gives us another tool in our toolbox to help increase the level of safety for our youngest guests. And that's really why we requested it. We weren't aware that this was on the books or it was something that we could apply for. It has nothing to do with any businesses. It really has to do with our ability to work with Waterville Police Department and ensure that anybody who might wish to drive onto the property at 19 Colby Street is dissuaded from doing anything that would put our children at risk. So that's really the rationale for us applying for this safe zone. It has enhanced penalties for people who violate the terms of that safe zone, and we feel that that's in the best interest of the children that we serve.
Councilor Klepak?
Is there any downside to approving this?
Right, Steve, are there any businesses that would be negatively impacted by this?
No. No, in fact, the only business property that the 500-foot radius touched was the manor.
And I would assume any existing business would be grandfathered in anyway. Bill, would I be correct in that assumption? If there was an existing business that was somehow in violation of the safe zone, they'd be grandfathered in?
Yes.
Councilor Frankie?
I think this is just a matter of oversight that nobody's really thought about the homeless shelter being just like the schools and other places that are playgrounds and such that are safe places. So I think we're just kind of updating something that has been overlooked.
Did anyone, Councilor Green?
Yes, I'd just like to add that, I mean, this doesn't seem like a case where it's reasonable to weigh the interests of a business versus the right of an institution like a homeless shelter to qualify for protections that are legally available. So I don't see any reason why we would deny the safe zone. It seems like a procedural thing to me, but if I'm mistaken, please let me know.
Yeah, and I think those, the business that might have been in conflict with the safe zone is no longer interested. So I think, the issue the issue was that they had gone quite a long way and gotten a certain guidance from the city, and just wanted to make sure we were crossing our T's and dotting our I's before we pulled the rug out from underneath them. But I don't think that's that's a concern at this point. Anybody else? All right, I guess we will move to a roll call.
Looks like Joe's got his hand up.
Can you bring the chief in, Sarah?
Yes.
I don't know if you're trying to talk, chief, but you're muted. Okay, go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
I did receive a call today, I should say a voice message from Arthur Kamel. And his voice message indicated that the family had purchased that business on the corner of College Avenue, I believe, Ash Street, and said that he would be here tonight and comment on that to the council. But I didn't see him raise his hand, so I thought I would just share that with you. They left that voice message that they purchased the building. He would be here tonight to tell you, as far as he's concerned, it was a moot point, as he left on the message.
It's a moot point until somebody tries to open another business somewhere within 500 feet of the homeless shelter.
Right.
Unless I see Arthur's hand go up, which I'm not, I think we'll move to a vote. You're muted, sir.
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepak,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 149-2021.
Ordinance providing for amendment to zoning.
Move to adopt.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on this one? Steve, do you just want to remind us what this is about and for the public as well?
Yeah, in generalities, this is a realignment of the boundaries of a zoning, a solar farm district rather, out on Webb Road near West River Road. It turns out when they designed the entire project that they needed space in a place that wasn't zoned appropriately. So they went back to the planning board, and the planning board recommends redrawing the district line. And that's what this amendment is.
Any questions from the council? Anyone from the public? No? All right, we'll move to a roll call.
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepak,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, moving on to ordinance 150-2021.
An ordinance providing for amendment to zoning.
We want to table this indefinitely, or we got to go through the motion process first? Sorry.
I think we have a lot of people here who want to talk about this. So at the very least, I think we should have a discussion about it before we table it or do anything else, just so people can have their say.
Motion to adopt to get the conversation.
Second.
Okay, anyone from the council want to kick this off?
I'll go on this one, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So as we've all seen, we've all gotten a bunch of emails, and sometimes we get it wrong. And I think we got it wrong on this one. So I'm going to take the lawyer's advice, and after everybody's had their say, I'm going to put a motion to table this indefinitely, and hopefully send this back to the back to the planning board and see what can or can't be done. But a lot of people have already, again, like I said, you've seen it. It's going to affect the community around the church, and I don't know that my support is still behind it. We'll have to see what comes of it, but we'll go from there. Thank you.
Steve, can you just sum up the recommended action that the council, and maybe it's changed if people have different opinions about the way this, because I think basically what the lawyer said was that we should send to the planning board a pretty good summary of what our intention is with this property, and then they're supposed to take a deep dive into the comprehensive plan to see if what the council wants to do as a whole is consistent with the comprehensive plan and with the law.
That is correct, and that they should hold another public hearing to allow the public to have input.
And so how exactly should we get to that resolution? Should we just table this, or should we amend this and then send it back to the planning board for discussion?
You have a resolution, which is the next item on your agenda, that does that referral back to the planning board. And the content of the agenda of that resolution was drafted by the lawyer who provided the opinion on the matter.
Okay, and if anyone wanted to make any further amendments that they wanted to see if the council is in support of, and then send back to the planning board, they would do that as part of the resolution?
No, I think that you would do that under the motion that you have on the table now. And then you're taking a first vote again, because it's an amendment to the ordinance that you've already taken one first vote on.
Okay. Councillor Green?
Well, it looks like the attorney that wrote that memo is here.
He is.
So
Yeah.
should we hear from him on the actions?
Yeah, can we bring Jim in, Sarah?
And I just want to say that my firm and I have a conflict of interest, so I'm having absolutely nothing to say about anything concerning this matter.
Jim, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Bill, mute yourself, please. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, thank you. Jim Katsipikis with the law firm of Perkins Thompson. Thank you for asking me to assist with this. My suggestion would be, first things first, let's table what you have in front of you. And just a tabling motion would be fine, the indefinite tabling. When you come to the resolution of remanding this back to the planning board for a new public hearing, if there are additional things that you might want, additional options, additional limitations or restrictions that you might want the board to consider, you could add that to your resolution at that time. And that might be the easiest way to handle it. Right now, you have the form of an ordinance as was adopted at your meeting in June. And certainly that would be what the centerpiece of any planning board hearing is going to be on remand. But if there are additional things you'd like them to consider, this would be a good opportunity in that resolution to ask them to consider those.
Okay, so I'm going to recommend, before we continue with the discussion, because we can have the discussion while we're doing the resolution, that we just go ahead and table this item and move on to the next one. And then we'll continue the discussion and bring the public in. So does somebody want to make that motion?
I will make that motion to table indefinitely.
Second.
And we'll take a roll call on that, Sarah.
Councillor Morris?
Yes.
Councillor Oliveira?
Yes.
Councillor Klepak?
Yes.
Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Foss?
Yes.
Councillor Frankie?
Yes.
Councillor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
And can we go ahead and bring Jennifer in but keep Jim here, because obviously we're probably going to need him to answer some questions.
Yes.
And then we'll move on to resolution
155.
155-2021.
A resolution providing for referral to the planning board.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and let Jennifer speak, and then we'll move on with the discussion. So Jennifer, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, so, this whole process right from the start has just been a little messed up. When I originally even looked at this building, before I made an offer, I went to the planning office and was told rezoning isn't an issue. It's done all the time. Not a problem. So when I went to the planning board, I was expecting this to be something that just sailed through. I was never asked for a presentation. I was never asked for anything other than to answer the planning board's questions. So nobody gave me or my group information saying, hey, we need you to really put a plan together for us and show us exactly word for word and exactly what you want to do. So we didn't. By the time we went through the first planning board meeting, I had had many discussions with people who work in the city. I did not have a lot of confidence in the planning board at that point. We already had the city planner who didn't notify abutters properly. I had at that point come to the conclusion that when 4 of the city planners, people on the planning board, live in a street abutting the project, that there was no way that I was going to get a fair hearing at that time. Now here, I'm hearing that I was told this is just going to pass through tonight. It's going to go through the process again. And then there would be the opportunity for the public to weigh in when it comes to the city council again. So once again, I'm just caught off guard tonight. I've been told this is just going to go through. Now I'm hearing, oh, we might have changed our minds. Well, people who have gotten these petitions out, we've heard from some of the people that the petition went to, that they're being told there's going to be a nightclub going there. There's not going to be a nightclub. This is an event center. The crazy rumors are, well, just crazy. And for them to have all of these emails going back and forth about, well, this should be turned into a homeless shelter. This should be turned into an elderly housing unit. All I'm trying to do is save a historical building. I'm not trying to say that elderly housing is bad. I've been accused of that. I've been made into this pariah. I'm expecting the whole town of Waterville to show up with torches and pitchforks tonight. And honestly, I'm just trying to save that church. I just want to do a good thing. And I am so annoyed by the whole process and the fact the city has not done this process correctly, apparently ever. And when I'm misled and told things that are not true, and I had no ability to say, well, tonight, what I was told, this is just going to go through. Now I'm told all these people have to come up and talk again, and that's fine. I'm more than willing to present to anyone in the public what our plan is. It is not a nightclub. I am just stymied by the fact that people don't want to have an event center there. I get that I want to have late hours. We might have some bigger events because I've got to pay the bills. For the most part, we want to host weddings. This is just the stupidest thing.
Our goal is to only host weddings if that can be possible and feasible. That's really all we are interested in doing. We do have to pay the bills.
So we want to be able to have events there because we need to be able to pay our bills. We have to serve alcohol if it's a wedding. That's all there is to it. And then to have the neighbors being told lies, out and out lies, is, infuriating. And I got to tell you, these two went out, like I said, before the last meeting here, and in about 30 minutes got 10 signatures. And all they were told by people that wanted to sign or that didn't want to sign, they'd knock on the door, hey, will you sign this for us? Basically, people said, we don't really care. Where do we sign? So getting a bunch of signatures doesn't mean that you have all those people who are so riled up. It just means they want you to go away from their door and they'll sign anything.
Well, first of all, Jennifer, I want to apologize. No matter what the outcome of this is, certainly this was not handled well by various people at the city. And it seems our process has been flawed for quite some time. And it's unfortunate that you had to be the one who, discovered it and had to go through all the headaches that have come along with that. And hopefully we are going to fix this moving forward. I always, personally, if people have come to the meeting and they want to talk about something, I don't want to cut them off from having a chance to at least speak their mind. I don't want to let anyone just, take over the meeting, but if people have come to the meeting, I want to give them a chance to speak. I would echo what you said. I would be careful for counselors to put too much weight in a petition. And I'm certainly not going to make any accusations towards anyone, but you have no idea what somebody says to somebody when they walk up to their door and ask them to sign something. And I agree, if somebody walked up to my door and said somebody wants to put a nightclub next to your house where there's going to be drunks all hours of the night, I probably would sign a petition and say I don't want it. Whether they actually did that or not, I don't know. But I think that's the point, is that you don't really know what was said to people when they sign a petition. So I understand it should be one thing that counselors factor into their opinion, but it shouldn't be the deciding factor. And with that, I think we're going to does anyone from the council want to respond to Jennifer before we bring other members of the public in or ask her a question? Jennifer, I'm going to go ahead and I'll let you speak one more time, and then I'm going to bring the public in.
Well, I'd like to state that a counselor here announced to everyone, and it ran in the paper, that I was opening a bar. So, that didn't help either. So then all of a sudden it is in the newspaper that I'm opening a bar right in the Sacred Heart Church. That was not helpful or true.
Sarah, can you bring in Josh Martin? You're muted, Josh.
Thank you. Too many buttons to push. Hi, thank you for letting me talk tonight. My name is Josh Martin. As I said, I live at 14 Morrill Avenue on the corner of Morrill and West Street. And I am among a group of neighbors who got together to discuss these plans, where people who are affected by it and people who wanted to express our concern. And that was really what we've done here, and what we did in an intention of presenting this petition, which I wrote along with several other members of our little group, is just to express to the public what is going on and ask for them to support some recommendations to the city and requests from the city. So I'd like to say from the start that there was probably 4 of us, I think, that went around and collected petitions, and I spearheaded this. I'll take responsibility for that. And I said very clearly to them, we're just going to present the facts of the plan as they were voted on by the city council. That's what we're to present to the neighbors that we talk with, and that's what we're to say. If any one of those people, I myself certainly never said the word nightclub. I never lied to anyone. I would never lie to anyone. We were very careful to do that in our writing of this petition as well. So I'd like to say that there's a copy of this has been distributed to the city council. I hope one can be made available to the public in some way, but I'd like to describe it here. We said right off the top that we're concerned about the plans and its effect in the surrounding neighborhood, but we welcome development of that property that conforms with its previous established use and its location in a residential neighborhood. We spell out simply the facts that the plan is to serve alcohol, hold live music performances, that the estimated capacity is about 330 attendees. That was one of the numbers that was presented. And that we're worried about that that operation disrupting our enjoyment of our homes and reducing the investment that we've made in our homes. So we're only asking in this, not for the city to oppose this, only for the city to take action to protect residents by taking certain steps. Among them, performing an impact study on various use cases of the property, including serving alcohol, live music performances, and the closing hours, a traffic study on traffic flow, limiting the business hours of operation to maintain the current noise and traffic level of the residential area, and among some other things that were small details and things as well that will be probably have another place in this process, and some things that the city is now doing. For example, sending the plans back to the planning board. We wrote this and started circulating it before those decisions were made. So we're all generally very happy about that. And I'd like to say that we're just neighbors here. We're just people who our stake in this is our investment in our home and our community. We're not people who have any other sort of agenda here other than making sure that there aren't large radical changes to the way that our neighborhood operates and the way that we can enjoy our neighborhood and enjoy our homes. And I spoke to people across many age groups and many demographics. I spoke personally to about half of the 86 people that we had signed this in just the 2.5 blocks surrounding the church. And we with many people in many age groups, both renters and owners, people from of all sorts of backgrounds. And we did find 2 or 3 people who did not want to sign our petition and were supportive of the plan, and we were respectful of that. But we found among all the people that we talked to, large opposition to the way that this is being done. And not opposition, I think, to something happening there, but just the potential when you say that the hours are up until 11 o'clock on Monday, I believe, and then the serving of alcohol and the up to the 300 people in the neighborhood in that time period. So we're merely asking for this to be considered and for the city to take some actions to protect its residents. We're not in opposition, I think, to some use of this property. We're not in opposition to a business being run out of this property. We're in opposition, we are in support of careful measures being taken to be sure that this does not radically disrupt and impact our neighborhood. And we think that those would be simple things that could be done. I won't say what the ideas are. Personally, I would be happy with a wedding venue. I would be happy with a venue that had closing times that were consistent with the children who live literally next to the parking lot of this church, or across the street from this church. Something around 9 p.m. was a number tossed out there. And I think that there is a way to move forward on this to save and protect the church while saving and protecting the interests of the residents. And thank you for the time.
Thank you, Josh. Sarah, can you bring Tom in?
Hi, thank you for having me. My name's Tom Schoening, and I'm from the law firm of Drummond & Drummond in Portland. And just sort of at the end of last week and officially today, I was retained by about 10 members of the local neighborhood community to look into this and see where it stands. And tonight, what I would just like to say is I support the recommendations made in Jim's memo as far as pushing this back to planning board to doing an analysis of the project, looking into the comprehensive plan and how it impacts just the residential character of the neighborhood. That's the primary concern of my clients, my 10 clients. And, they made it very clear to me that they don't want to kill this project. They just, want to suggest reasonable operational restrictions that will preserve the residential character of the surrounding neighborhood. So I can echo certain things that Josh said, but I don't represent Josh. But I just support, overall, we support Jim's memo, and we'll leave most of the comments of my clients to the public hearing process before the planning board. So thank you.
Thank you. So Jim, can I just ask you a question? So we should get this as close to what the council supports as possible before we send it to the planning board, correct?
That's my advice, yes.
And so I would point out to the counselors that any change to the zoning ordinance takes a 5-2 vote. So whatever we're going to do has to have the support of 5 city councilors. So if Rick, for example, I know you mentioned you might have changed your position and you were the one who offered the amendments at the last meeting. Is there anything you want to change about the amendments that you offered to the last meeting, or are you comfortable sending this back to the planning board as it sits right now?
No, let me speak to that a little bit, and because I brought up the emails that we've all received. I am going to the next planning board meeting when this lands on their desk. I want to hear from both sides. I want to hear what we didn't hear here from both sides. Okay. So I say my current position, even regarding what has happened before, send it back as a blank slate, let the public hearing happen. And when it comes back, we should have, according to what we're seeing from Jim, is a report out of the planning board as to their real recommendations, like we've said time and time again about planning board. And I'm not picking on planning board. I'm saying that I've asked for their recommendations in some sort of here's our recommendation and why it's our recommendation, and let that come back to us at a later date. I have no intentions right now to offer any add this, take out that to it. My thought is just send it back as a clean slate and let this go the right course, the way it's supposed to, because we got it wrong in the first round. And then I'll be at that planning board to listen with open ears.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but what we're sending to the planning board right now to consider is the amended version of the zoning that came out of the last meeting.
That's my understanding with the ordinance 150-2021, the one that you just tabled indefinitely.
Right, but with the amendments that the council made last week, that's what we're
Correct.
asking. And according to your memo, my understanding really is it's not so much the planning board's job to go in and tinker with what the council wants to do. What their job is to look at the comprehensive plan and decide whether what we send them is consistent with the comprehensive plan, correct?
That's right. You're looking to see, they may not recommend this. I mean, it is potentially possible they take a look at this and they say, we've reviewed the comprehensive plan and we think it supports this, but doesn't support that. You may get a report like that, or you may say that it supports it entirely. We don't know until the planning board's had a chance to review this and look at what the planner suggests for the various policies that are in your comprehensive plan. But the idea is you have this that has been adopted, given first reading with those changes. And you're going to get the response from the planning board. Do they recommend it? And for what reasons? And if they don't recommend pieces of it or all of it, why? And then you're able to better act when this comes back to you.
And so if it comes back to us, we still at that point would have the ability to take under advisement their position and make changes again at that point with further public discussion?
You would. My concern is that if the changes are one that no one has ever discussed before, that haven't been considered by the planning board, that's when you start having problems. And so, the planning board gave you version A. You gave them version B. We'll get back their reaction to B. They may say we prefer A, at least it's all been discussed before and you can make a policy decision which way you go.
And then can someone clarify for me, Steve or Sarah, what exactly was in the amendment? Because there was some confusion about whether rezoning it to commercial A was actually part of the amendment that Rick offered. Was that actually part of the amendment? Do we know? I think that's was everybody's impression, but Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong. You said you watched the video back and you weren't certain that he actually offered the amendment to make it commercial A.
Right. So what was sent to the attorney, Jim, was not to make it commercial, and it was discussed prior to Rick's proposal, and then what Rick proposed was to keep it residential and lay the contract zone on top of it. And then, so that had been discussed. I don't know which one of these you want to send to the planning board now that you've got a whole new a whole new slate. You know, you can send them something different because you guys had discussed it originally as let's change it to commercial A, but that's not what Rick proposed and that's not what was written down. And I wanted to mention something else. So I was told it would take a 4-3 vote tonight, and it would take the 5-2 vote if you change the zone.
Exactly.
Okay.
So Jim, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any opinion about what's a more legally defensible position? A contract zone laid over a commercial zone, or a contract zone laid over a residential zone that may not necessarily be consistent with residential uses?
The way that this is worded and the way that the construct is, you're taking something that's residential now and everything remains residential, but you're taking this property and saying we are going to make this property commercial A. That's the way that the ordinance that you've tabled reads. And so that's a contract zone. You get to attach conditions and limitations that would make it consistent with the underlying already zoned properties that are in residential. I think I'm hearing not that there's an alternative way to contract zone it, but that another way to do this might be to just rezone it to commercial, rezone this particular property to commercial. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think the discussion is we can either put a contract zone over the residential zone, which to me is more questionable because, you know, the contract zone is supposed to be consistent with the underlying zone, right? I mean, usually a contract zone either puts more limitations or loosens things like setbacks, right? I mean, it's not, so to make it would seem more legally defensible if you rezoned it to commercial A, and then if you wanted to put conditions on that, then put a contract zone on top of the commercial A, because then at least the underlying zone is consistent with the contract zone.
Right, because you don't have to worry about consistency with existing and permitted uses as you do under the contract zone test under state law and under your ordinance. It would seem that just simply rezoning it to commercial A would be more, it could be more readily done. Contest when you take one piece of land, or two, as in this case. Question for spot zoning, the question for rezoning generally is it consistent with your comprehensive plan? So in both instances, whether it's a contract zone, making this under contract commercial A, or just straight rezoning to commercial A, you need to check comprehensive consistency with the comprehensive plan. If it's a contract zone, you have to look at consistency with the permitted and existing uses in that residential zone. You don't look at that if it's just a straight rezoning.
Rick?
So we passed by unanimous vote the approval of the consent agenda, which is an approval of minutes from last meeting. in last meeting, ordinance 150-2021, a motion made and seconded to amend to move both parcels to CA with a contract zone with a stipulation that they revert back to the original zoning when sold. The event center can be open until 11 p.m. on midnight Saturdays, on and on and on and on. Which one do we hold ourselves to? Do we hold ourselves to the video, or do we hold ourselves to our minutes? As in Robert's rules. And that might be a question for Jim.
Well, and I think the bigger question, honestly, is what is it that we want? Because whatever we did at the last meeting,
in the same breath, in the same sense that on it, and that the video shows that we did not, but the notes in the minutes say that we did go to move both parcels to commercial A with the stipulations that we had. So if we're going to eliminate, if we're saying that CA wasn't part of that discussion, and we're going to push on the alcohol in the 11, move it all as a package or don't move it all is my point here. So if we're going to move it back to planning board as a full package, it goes back as two parcels on CA with 11 p.m. alcohol, so on and so forth. And I can be agreeable, disagreeable. Tell me what your thoughts are.
well, I think what Jim is saying is we can make amendments to what we're sending to the planning board now. This would be the time to say, listen, I changed my mind. I don't think 11 o'clock is a good idea anymore. This is going to have to get 5 votes, so maybe it's 9, or we can just clarify, make sure that we're talking about what we really want to talk about is rezoning it to commercial A or not. Go ahead, Jim.
One quick comment. If you are going to rezone this, not contract zoning, but rezone it to commercial A, you no longer have the opportunity to put limitations and restrictions like hours of operation, whether or not alcohol is served. That's a function of your going through the contract zoning process where you can put limitations on. If you just rezone it, it becomes open to whatever uses are available in commercial A, which could be, and I don't have it right in front of me, but it could be a bar. I'm not suggesting that's what you're asking for. I'm saying that would be something that's open if it's just rezoned commercial A.
Right, but couldn't we rezone it and then do a contract zone on top of the new zone?
Not really, because it's in the zone that it wants to be in anyway. Use a contract zone to add the characteristics of a zone that aren't allowed now. And so that's why you put it in commercial A, but with these restrictions as a commercial zone.
Okay, I just want to be sure because obviously we have kind of, messed this one up a little bit. So I just want to be very clear on what we are doing and make sure everyone understands what we're doing. Jennifer had her hand up. I'm going to let her speak. Try to make it brief, Jennifer.
Yeah, no, the only thing I was going to say, I think now he's addressed it, was that it abuts commercial A, so it would be easier to then extend commercial A and then lay the contract zone on it. But I think he's just said basically then you wouldn't be able to control the hours, because I thought you could layer a contract zone on top of the commercial A, but apparently we're just being told we're not able to.
Right.
Does that include prohibiting a resale, or I'm sorry, prohibiting a reversion of the zoning upon resale?
You have that in your contract zone as a term. And
right, but if we didn't go contract, are we precluded from?
You would be changing that legislatively. Basically, as was just suggested, you'd be expanding the commercial zone A.
Councillor Green.
So since we tabled the initial proposal amendment to the planning board's recommendations, aren't we starting from scratch anyway here?
We sort of are, but again, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but I'm pretty sure what your legal opinion said is that the council should be as clear as possible about what our intentions are. So we should put this in some sort, whatever we think a final form of what 5 of us are going to vote in favor of. Send that back to the planning board to discuss. It is really not their job to change this, change that. It's their job to send back recommendations and comments about whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan or if there's any legal issues. And then it would come back to the council to make any changes again at that point. But any changes we make would have to be changes that either we had previously discussed or that had been discussed at the planning board.
Right.
And so I guess that's the question, is what is it exactly that the council wants the planning board to consider? Do we want them to just have a discussion about what they originally sent us? Do we want to have them to have a discussion about the contract zone on top of the residential, but with the changed hours? So the 11 on whatever it was, Rick's amendment. Or do we want them to discuss rezoning it to commercial A? What is it that we want the planning board to talk about? I think what we want them to talk about, from what I'm hearing, is a contract zone on top of the residential zone, because that allows us to place restrictions such as hours, and it reverts back if it's sold and things like that. And so then do we want them to discuss the extended hours that Rick had suggested with his amendment? Or do we just want them to discuss what they had originally done, which was 9 o'clock closing time and no alcohol? Rick?
I'll start off. We'll get this ball rolling. Just like I've said a few times on this council, that we don't get the discussion points that they have at the planning board. Okay, there was obviously some discussion about 9 o'clock cutoff, no alcohol. I'm sure there's noise. There was a noise discussion that didn't get put on paper. Again, I can't tell everybody enough. We all need to go there and listen to both sides, open eared, and see what's going on. I would like to have a writing on why 9 o'clock and why no alcohol in clear, undefined, no uncertain terms. These are the reasons. Outside of everything, I guess everything else, but this is going to be a public hearing where everybody's going to come and talk, and then we're all going to find out how this is going to go. So I'll start that ball there. That I want to know. They sent it. I want to know why they sent it the way they sent it.
Before I go to other people, I guess what I'm going to recommend, Jennifer has heard all of this conversation. So what is it that she wants to ask for, I guess, is my question at this point. Because she might as well ask for what we should send to the planning board is what Jennifer is asking for, that she feels comfortable will allow her to be able to run this business. Because my guess is, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, if you can't sell alcohol and you have to close at 9, this project's dead, correct?
It's dead, yeah. So what you originally sent, I was going to try and work with. I would have preferred it to be Friday and Saturday night with the more extended hours. My hope was that after we were open a year or two, we could come back and send this again to discussion and perhaps change the contract zone after it's been proven to work, and that the neighbors are calmed down and have said, okay, all right, it's been open. You know what? It actually wasn't an issue. I mean, everyone's afraid of the unknown. So I get it. I remember, anyway, I won't get into all of that. Many projects are unknown, but with what you originally sent, I would have loved to have Friday and Saturday with the extended hours. If there's no alcohol, there is no project, for sure.
So that's what I'm going to recommend, and I don't want this conversation to go on forever because we're not going to make the ultimate decision tonight. Basically, what we're deciding is what we want the planning board to talk about. And since Jennifer is basically telling us she can't operate her business under the guidelines the planning board sent, I think what we should ask them to talk about is the amendments that we made and what was actually in the video. So the contract zone on top of the rural residential, allow her to sell alcohol, and the hours that we had talked about. That's what we should ask the planning board to talk about. Because I think if Jennifer doesn't get those things, this project doesn't happen anyway.
And being able to rent the office space.
Right. And so with that, I'll go to the counselors again. I see members of the public with their hands up. If this is to I just want to say to members of the public, if this is to talk about details of what's going to finally be approved, you're going to have that chance at the planning board. And again, when this comes back to the council meeting. So I think this is just a time for us to clarify about what is exactly going to be talked about at the planning board. And with that, I'll go to Claude.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm appalled that the council chairman would want to cut off a debate when a lot of people have showed up to speak about this issue. He's let Ms. Bergeron go on and on and on. I think we should hear the rest of the public. This is a public forum. This is a public meeting. The public has come to listen. What I would like to do, offer is an amendment to our resolution to send to the planning board that council is in favor of restricting hours to 9 o'clock and that council is in favor of restricting alcohol sales. So that's I'm offering that as an amendment to the resolution.
Does anyone second that? All right, seeing none, the amendment dies. Councilor Green?
Could I just ask?
And I just want to say, I'm not cutting off debate. I just don't want to, we have a long meeting. We have to talk about the budget, and we're not here to make a decision on this tonight. We're here to ask for a recommendation from the planning board. So I just don't want to, I only want to let this go so far because we have to move on.
So my question on Claude's amendment was, I'll get to in a minute, but what I actually had my hand up for was to say that I was actually at both planning board meetings and I did hear the debate. And I think that it is important for us to hear from the people who came today to speak, at least to some degree, before we send something back to the planning board, because we're wasting everyone's time if we send something back that really is dead in the water. And there's a pretty wide gulf here. So let's hear, at least, let's determine an amount of time that we're going to hear from people so that we can make a recommendation that really has a chance of being considered. And so my question on Claude's amendment was what he means by limiting alcohol.
Claude?
My amendment died from lack of a second. Therefore, there's nothing on the table to be discussed, Councilor Green.
Well, and so to my point, the real question is what are 5 councilors going to vote in favor of? So if you're hearing something that there's no way you're going to support, now is the time to speak up, because that's the other thing. We can just put an end to this right now and say we don't even want to send this back to the planning board because there's no way we're going to vote to allow them to have alcohol and stay open until 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Councilor Green, I'll let you go and then we'll go to Tom.
Well, right. Okay. So I would offer an amendment that would limit the sale of alcohol to wine and beer with closing time of 9 o'clock on weekdays and 11 o'clock on the weekends.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Was there anything else, Rebecca? Sorry.
The question of renting, there was the question of renting the space. I mean, I'd like to just offer that amendment as it stands now, and I would like to hear from people who've come here to speak on it.
Claude, you're seconding?
Yes.
Is there any discussion from the council on the amendment? Tom?
Can't hear you, Tom.
And can you guys take your hands down just so I don't,
Jen?
I'm sure when you want to talk again.
Jen, I support any compromise. I would like to see the church stay. I would be pretty sad if that gorgeous structure came down and got, not that I don't support affordable housing for seniors in the community. I do. But I feel like there are better places for it than that particular spot. I would be pretty sad to see that church get torn down. So I do support any compromise, any reasonable compromise. I advocate whatever minimal criteria that Jen can thinks that she can abide by for feasibility of the business, and even if it is for a year or two. This proposed amendment that's on the table, how does that square with your plan?
I'd love to see the studies that show people get less drunk on beer and wine than they do with liquor. If somebody's having a wedding and they have a choice of a venue that serves cocktails and beer and wine, or one that can only serve beer and wine, they're not going to choose my venue. A lot of the trend in weddings is towards a signature cocktail at a wedding. So people want to be able to have a cocktail named right after their union. You know, it's to me, I don't really even understand the whole beer and wine versus having a full liquor license. Most people just choose that because it's cheaper. So if you have a pizza restaurant, you know, you have beer and wine because maybe you're not going to have cocktails with pizza. But why would you? I don't understand this compromise. It makes no sense to me. But I guess it doesn't have to. We're dead in the water with beer and wine. I can't have a wedding venue where I need to be able to book the location for weddings, and people who want to drink have weddings. I guess that's where I stand on that. And as far as the hours were a huge compromise anyway. I thought that Rick did a great job with proposing something that I really didn't like, and I was fine with moving forward with that. Like I said, I would have liked to have been Friday and Saturday with the extended hours, but I mean, we had wanted extended hours every night. And one of the arguments was, well, this is ridiculous. They can't say hours. It's an event venue. So I don't know who's going to rent it and what they're going to rent it for. I wanted closing hours at 1 a.m. just so I could be open to, if somebody has a Thursday night, if New Year's Eve falls on Thursday night, I could stay open for a New Year's Eve party, you know, something like that. So, I mean, we do plan to have some other events other than just weddings because we have to pay the bills. Our ultimate goal is for this to be a wedding venue. Even with that, it has got to be one that serves alcohol. So I don't know what else I can compromise on. I have to pay the bills. What I'd like the neighbors that are here listening to hear is this. I looked at this for many other purposes. I looked at it and said, all right, you know what? I could put like an antique shop in there. I could put in something that does like furniture and housewares and all of these things. But that then triggers a change in use. So that triggers $300,000 or more of a sprinkler system. It's not feasible. There's no way I can do it. So anything I came up with that wasn't this it's impossible for me. Maybe somebody with deeper pockets could save that church and put a $300,000 sprinkler system in. I can't do it. I lived directly across the street on the corner of Center and Pleasant Street for 6 years and just stared at that church every day. It's a beautiful building. It's a beautiful church. I just wanted to save it. And honestly, the flack I'm getting and the accusations of so many things it's so offensive that this town is treating a person who wants to do something good this way. And I'm done talking.
Sarah, can you bring in Natty Lazarian?
Yes.
And we'll be a little loose here, but what we're supposed to be discussing at the moment is the amendment that was offered. So as much as possible, try to stick close to that discussion. So that was the beer and wine and the hours. You're muted, Natty.
Muted.
There we go. Okay, there we go. It took a minute to unmute. So I guess my question is, I live at 24 Morrill Avenue, and my question is that I don't even understand why you're even considering rezoning this location to a commercial zone. That is what is disturbing me, and it seems like to be the basis. And I'm understanding of wanting to preserve that building. I agree, it's a beautiful church building, and if it can be preserved, so be it. But the idea of changing that zoning to commercial, just so close to our neighborhood or the neighbors all around that area, it's just pushing. To me, it's like the start of pushing or expanding Main Street into residential areas. And once you start doing that, it will grow. And we will lose the beauty of the neighborhoods that we have in Waterville, which are so vital and important to inviting new people to come and live in our city. We have an influx of new young families with children who are moving into these neighborhoods, and we want to keep that as desirable as possible. So for me, the bottom line is it's just not even to consider changing that location to commercial. And and as far as Jennifer's plea and wanting to accuse people and feel sorry for her and feel like she's doing something admirable for the building, I just don't buy all of that. She's in there to make money, bottom line, and it's an investment. So that's all. That's all I have to say. I just feel like the property should not be changed to commercial zoning. Period.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you bring
Chair? If I may ask, if we get we start time limits on some of the conversations here.
Yeah,
because all of these have gone way beyond 3.
I'm going to bring in Elizabeth Leonard, and then I think we're going to try to get this in a final form to vote on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a little bit late to this conversation, so not today. I've been here for the whole meeting, but I'm just sort of coming to grips with what's going on with this proposal for this property. And I guess what I'm not understanding is the choice now between either the event center with restrictions or the event center with no restrictions, and there's no other possibility for this property? because that seems to be like a strange and maybe deeply problematic choice to be making. Particularly, it's true, maybe we have new young families moving into town, but we have desperate families who have been here for a while who need housing as well. And I just don't understand how this fits into a larger plan for what we're going to do for people who need housing. And so it seems like a weird thing. We're talking about an event center and alcohol and blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, people are desperate, and we have a housing crisis.
I guess what I would point out is the city does not own this property. The church owns the property. Ms. Bergeron has made an offer to buy the property and came to the city and asked us to consider what she wants to do with it. So that's what we're talking about. Any other discussion about any other thing is not on the table because none of those things are a reality. The city doesn't own it. The church owns it, and they can sell it if they want to, and Ms. Bergeron can buy it if she wants to. And she can do what's allowed to do with it. And we can change what's allowed to do with it if we want to, or we can say no. And so that's what the discussion is. Any other discussion really comes after it's decided what's happening with this proposal that's currently in front of us.
But so there is the possibility, though, that the answer is just no, we don't want the event center, and we'll hope for something else there.
Yes.
That's still a possibility. Okay.
That could be the outcome.
That's what I was interested in. Thank you.
I'm going to move to a vote on the amendment. So this is on Rebecca's amendment, which was to limit the hours to 9 o'clock on weeknights, 11 o'clock on weekends, and beer and wine only. Right, Rebecca? That was all that was involved in your amendment?
Well, yes, but if it's unacceptable to Jennifer, then I'm going to withdraw the amendment because there's no point sending it to the planning board if they're going, and I don't want to waste their time investigating something that's not acceptable to her.
Right, and she may just waive. That was sort of my point. Is like I think what we should send to them is what Jennifer is where we ended up after the last meeting.
Okay.
Because it sounds like if she doesn't get that, the project's done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So we should ask them to, discuss what Jennifer is saying will allow her to actually operate this business. And if they say no, then it's not going to happen.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead, Jim.
Mr. Thomas, just one quick clarification. When we say 9 o'clock weekdays and 11 o'clock weekends, are we saying Sunday through Thursday 9 o'clock and Friday and Saturday 11?
She withdrew her amendment anyway. So.
All right. Sorry. Thank you.
Councilor Frankie.
Just so everyone's clear, what we're sending back to the planning board is the suggestion that Councilor Foss made last week that Ms. Bergeron get exactly what she's asked for, which is unlimited alcohol and hours till 11 o'clock. I'm personally totally opposed to that. I don't think we should send that back to the planning board.
Councilor Klepak.
Thank you. So I feel it's a little unfortunate that this whole thing is played out this way. All invested parties are deeply lawyered up right now. And so I have a couple legal questions for the city's lawyer. So first of all, can you explain to me, a bit of a neophyte to this field, what are the legalities? Is there any legal jeopardy for the city around any particular configuration of a contract zone?
I'll have to give you the dreaded lawyer's answer of it depends. In order to be able to contract zone, you have to make sure that the property is this zoning, this new zoning, is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will grant you, If you read a comprehensive plan, there is information that probably could make anybody happy on any side. It's the goals, policies of the city, and then your land use objectives as to how you want the city to grow in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be consistent with that. But you also, in contract zoning, have to be consistent with the existing uses and permitted uses that are in that district already that you're seeking to contract rezone. Mm-hmm. So you have to pass both tests. And what a court is going to do, if anyone were to file suit on this, a court is going to look at the evidence before this body, before the city council, and look to see, is there a rational basis for the decision that this board made, that this council made, on the basis of what you had in front of you, to say perhaps yes to both questions, that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan and consistent with the existing uses. The court's going to be looking to see what you had in front of you and does it rationally support the decision you made. They're deferential because it's a legislative decision. It's a policy decision that you're going to make, but there has to be something in front of you. And right now there's nothing. And no, I'm not casting any blame anywhere. This is simply, you don't have a report in front of you. So that's why the idea, send it back, let's get the report. But that's the legality, that's the test. And the consequence to the city is that if you don't have evidence before you that might support that, then you run the risk that someone can challenge the legality of your decision.
Mm-hmm. If I may then follow up on that, due to the subjective, at least partially subjective nature of the comprehensive city plan, and the task of the planning board to reconcile this amended proposal or whatever we're sending to them here, are there any legal liabilities for the city associated with having members of the planning board as signers on this petition that has been circulated in opposition to the church?
Right, they are interested parties.
I just want to know what the city's legal exposure is if members of the planning board are signers of the petition against it, and then this gets sent back to them. And their job is to interpret this subjective document, which is the comprehensive plan from the city. It seems a little bit. I'd just like to hear you talk about that.
When the law looks at conflicts of interest, it's whether you have a direct or indirect financial interest. But in the end, in the statute, in Maine law, and conflicts of interest is the provision that that public officials should avoid the appearance of impropriety. And while this is a policy matter and a legislative matter, and it's one in which planning board members and councilors can hear from the public, this isn't like a license or a permit situation where that would be an ex parte communication. This is something where it's a legislative matter, the public can approach you on that. However, how does it appear when a planning board member has taken a position on a policy matter that is to come before him or her for a recommendation? It appears inappropriate. Is it a conflict that would bar that person from hearing it? I'd let the rest of the board members decide that one, but it's not something I'd recommend.
And what would the remedy be, Jim? I mean, let's say 4 members of the planning board, which is a group of 7 people. If 4 of them have a perceived conflict of interest, how do we even proceed on the matter at that point?
That's my concern. It's a mess right now.
Ouch. If we were in an application proceeding and 4 had taken a position before they had made a decision on something where they're supposed to remain impartial, I would suggest that we name are there alternates on the planning board?
No.
We will muddle through this one, but it's not a good place to be. Even recognizing it's a legislative matter, it would be better to try to stay as neutral as possible and just make your decision based upon what you hear at the hearing and not sign something taking a side before you make that recommendation. What's been done's been done. let's see if we can work through that. I'm not ready to fully answer that one right now. This is been doing this a long time. I haven't seen this happen before.
We're going to get our money's worth from you, Jim.
You have.
Councilor Foss.
So we are going to get our money's worth. With Councilor Green removing her amendment and this being a go, no go for the entire project, I'm going to respectfully request that we hear from the three people that have their hands raised with timers set, just so we can have an informed discussion and decision whether we send this to planning board or not, because there, from what I'm hearing, there is a potential that this may not make it to the planning board. And if that's so be it, so be it. If it is, we need to hear from the public. I'm with Councilor Frankie on that.
Can we bring Tom back in, Sarah?
Thanks for bringing me back in. Just to Claude's comment that there probably are many members of the public who want to speak. I only speak for my 10 clients, but I did speak to them beforehand and said, reserve most of your, tonight's probably not the night. The public hearing before the planning board and site plan review is probably the best time to communicate your concerns about use operation restrictions. But what I did want to comment on is, the zoning change versus contract zoning. And on behalf of my 10 neighbor clients, they would not support a zoning, or they wouldn't recommend a zoning change. They would prefer the contract zoning method, just because it provides for those reasonable use restrictions to bring the contract zone into conformity with the comprehensive plan. So that would be our recommendation. As far as the time and the beer and wine alcohol restriction, they would support the beer and wine alcohol restriction. I think the timing's something that still could be the subject of discussion before the planning board. So I'll reserve my comments on the time for the public hearing before the planning board. The only other recommendation I'd make to the city council is, if you're sending this back to the planning board, I would just suggest that you also ask for some type of traffic impact study, as that's a primary concern for my clients. Just the amount of, if there's a wedding there on, many Friday nights and many Saturday nights, it's just a time when, in the summertime when people are outside, kids are outside, and they're just concerned about the increased traffic and just noise. So if that could be part of the city council's suggestion, just to gain more information from the planning board about this project in the contract zone, that's what I would recommend.
And so just so everyone's clear, if we ask for a traffic study, that either is going to be paid for by Jennifer, or it's going to be paid by the people selling the property. That is not something the city is going to pay for. That's between the buyer and the seller.
If the city council feels the traffic study is important, the cost of it is certainly a reality.
Can we bring Josh Martin back in?
Hi, I'll be brief. And I just want to speak to the question about the petition that was brought up. No one on the planning board, to my knowledge, signed the petition, and I've been over the names. There is a name, Tom Dupree, on that petition, but that is Tom Dupree Sr. That is not the Tom Dupree who's a member of the planning board. And full disclosure, my wife is a member of the planning board, but I'm acting as a citizen in my own right and separately from her, and have not been coordinating with her about this petition specifically and our actions in requesting that the city do these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom.
Josh, the petition that you had sent to us, could you send us an updated version of that? Because what I have is a blank petition and a map with a bunch of check marks next to it.
I think he sent it this afternoon, Tom. Let me see if you're copied on it. If not, I'll forward it to you.
Yeah, the one I have doesn't actually have names. I just have lots where people live with check marks on them.
Yeah, he sent us an email at 4:44 with the signed petition, and you were copied on that.
Oh, I see now. Pardon me.
Okay, so I think we're going to bring this to a resolution here. So I guess, Councillor Frankie.
Just like to respond to the comments by the attorney that traffic study be included. So I'd like to amend what we're sending to the planning board to say, suggest that a traffic study should be included in the evaluation of the project.
I will second that.
Any discussion just on that issue? I see, I'm sorry, I don't know your name and it just says Jennifer. So I'll recognize Jennifer.
Our capacity is 300 people. Our capacity is 100 cars. You want us to spend thousands of dollars on a traffic study for 100 cars that at maximum that will show up?
I guess we'll find out when we vote on the amendment. Let's go ahead and vote on Claude's amendment.
Councillor Morris?
I'm sorry, can you repeat what the terms were of that amendment?
Amending, adding a traffic study be included to the evaluation of the project.
And that's to be conducted by the city or what?
No, this would have to be, this is between the buyer and the seller. So one of them would have to pay for it, or they would have to figure out how it gets paid for. That is not, we're not paying for a traffic study.
And the other elements would be?
What was voted on last time.
Okay.
Which at this point sounds like, according to the minutes, includes rezoning it to commercial A. So at some point we're going to have to deal with that issue, just so you know. But all we're voting on at the moment is the amendment to include the stipulation that there has to be a traffic study. That's all we're voting on is the amendment.
Councillor Morris?
Yes.
Councillor Oliveira?
Yes.
Councillor Klepak?
Sure.
Councillor Green?
Okay.
Councillor Foss?
Yes.
Councillor Frankie?
Yes.
Councillor Thomas?
No.
Vote is 6 in favor, 1 opposed.
So somebody needs to move the resolution as amended.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And are there any other amendments that anyone wants to offer? I'm going to offer the amendment that instead of discussing rezoning to commercial A, we leave it as residential with the contract zone on top of it with the conditions that have been discussed in terms of hours of operation and alcohol.
I will second that.
Second.
And with that, is there any discussion? I'll let Jennifer speak and then we'll move to the council.
Yeah, so on this traffic study, I really don't feel like spending an awful lot more money in this. I've added lawyers' fees. I've done a whole bunch of stuff to try and push this through. Honest to God, I just think the city can have that church. But I don't want to do the study until I know if it's going through or not. I'm not spending more money when I don't even know if it's going to go through because I don't know what the hell the planning board that has 4 people in conflict are going to say. 4 people that live on that street, Morrill. This is insane. But anyway, Jim, welcome to Waterville.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, actually, can I ask a question of Councilman Frankie? At the At the last meeting, you said that Jennifer Bergeron would not be here if she had listened to the advice of her counsel. And I just want to know if you could clarify what that counsel was and who it came from?
No, I could not.
Let's not let this get too personal. I mean, I know it's very hard, but so let's move on. There's an amendment on the floor. Is there any discussion about
I had a question. Like, when does this traffic study get done? Because I'm not doing it if I don't know I have this going forward. If it's not moving in the right direction and it's going to get shot down anyway, I'm not investing more in this thing. This is ridiculous. Honestly, I have a really bad taste in my mouth about the whole thing. And as far as letting it crumble and letting people do drug deals on the front steps, which we saw twice when we were there, let it continue. I just am very fed up with this whole thing.
My understanding would be that you'd have to complete the traffic study before they would vote on your proposal. I'm just saying that's what I understand. Councillor Foss.
Then we're trying to get things to the planning board that we want to hear about. Not that we're going. Tonight's just about what we'd like to hear from the public meeting in the planning board. Okay, and we've got to get everybody on board or everybody off board. One of the two is going to happen. And I'm you know me, I was with you at the very beginning. I like that church. I said the same thing about the other church that got torn down. I want to make sure that this is a win-win for everybody, or it's not for everybody. Okay. What we're going to send back to the planning board is what we want the discussion to be around. And if it comes back from the planning board that a traffic study should not happen, they're going to have their reasons. And then we're all going to have a clear idea of what those reasons are and why we shouldn't, or just the exact opposite. That's why I'm in favor of it. Just to hear the arguments one way or the other is at that point, and the way I understand it, and Jim, you can stop me if I'm wrong, but this is a discussion point that we'd like to have the planning board have about the project as a whole. It's not saying that we're in favor of it right now. We're talking about what we'd like to have the planning board discuss and bring back to the council as to their recommendations and as to why with a written statement per se, whatever's going to happen.
I'm going to let Jim respond to that. But again, I'm just going to summarize my understanding and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jim. What the best course of action is for the council to send to the planning board as close to a final request as possible. So what is it that you support? That's what we should send to the planning board. And then they should talk about it. And their purview is not to say 11:15 or 11:20. Their purview is to say, here's what the council wanted to do. It's legal and it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's really the only thing they're looking at that point. They're not parsing every little thing that the council sends to them. They're looking at what we sent to them. They're discussing, is it legal? And is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? And I'll let Jim speak to that.
I'm totally in agreement with that. And just on the traffic piece, just so we all understand, if this requires site plan approval, and I don't know if this triggers it or not, but if it does, one of the standards that the planning board will apply is that it will not cause this event center will not cause unreasonable highway or public road congestion or unsafe conditions with respect to use of the highways or public roads, both on and off the site. They're supposed to get letters from the city engineer and appropriate state agencies that this will not cause unreasonable congestion or unsafe conditions. If the city engineer sees that there's a problem, the developer has to provide specifics of any requested changes. So there will be an opportunity to discuss traffic if this triggers site plan approval. Perhaps the planning board could write that back to you that, maybe we don't need to do a traffic study at this time because we will be undertaking traffic review during site plan review. If they're going to be reviewing it, I don't know the answer to that question. But as far as what you proposed, Councilor Thomas, if you send back what had been proposed, that's received its first reading, that has the changes that Ms. Bergeron had requested, then the planning board can conduct a public hearing and make written comment on that, supporting it or opposing it, and explaining the reasons why, and that will allow you to take the next steps.
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor, which was that I was clarifying that what we're going to send back to the planning board is that this will remain zoned as it is with a contract zone on top of it instead of rezoning it to commercial A. And that will contain the conditions that were already voted on in the last meeting. So the hours of operation that we previously had voted on, and that they're allowed to have a liquor license. So we're voting just on that amendment to sending it to them to discuss whether it remains zoned residential with a contract zone instead of discussing rezoning it to commercial A. Is everyone clear on that? Okay, let's take a vote on that, Sarah.
And the traffic study, where do we stand with that?
That was a separate amendment that already passed.
So that's also included.
That's not what we're voting on, because this is not the final vote. This is just amending what we're sending to be clear that we're asking them to discuss a contract zone, not rezoning to commercial.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepek,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Then we need to move it as amended.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
You do have a Dan.
I'm going to bring Tom in one more time. Then I'm going to let Jen have the last say, and then we're going to vote on this, okay?
I'll make this really quick. I was just looking at section 5. It says site plan review required. So, that would get into all site plan analysis. So, that's my only comment. Thank you.
Jen, did you want to say anything?
All right, so my question is, if a site plan review is required, it sounds like the city engineer has to make a determination if there's going to be a traffic issue anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So then is there going to be a necessity for this traffic study? And I'd like to point out they had 3,000 congregants. We're going to have a maximum capacity of 300. Like I said, or Tommy said, 100 cars. Anyway, but if the city engineer is the one making that determination, isn't that a traffic study?
Normally that would come at the recommendation of the city engineer, whether or not there needs to be a traffic study. Yes.
Okay.
But that's not where we are at this point.
Okay. Now you can change that if you know that the city engineer has to make the recommendation of whether a traffic study is needed or not. You can change that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to a vote on this, and I want to be clear what we're voting on. What we're voting on is sending this back to the planning board to discuss placing a contract zone on this property that would allow the business to operate at, I forget what the exact hours were, but it was whatever hours we voted on at the last meeting. They, at this point, would be required to do a traffic study. And I would assume the amendment in regard to leasing the office stands as well to a separate entity. It does not necessarily have to be Jennifer operating that office. So that is what we are voting on sending to the planning board for discussion. So, and what the planning board is going to discuss is whether it's legal and consistent with the comprehensive plan. They're not going to tinker with the hours. They're not going, they can send us all of their thoughts, but they're just going to be offering recommendations, not changes, because ultimately we have the final say anyway. Sarah, can we move to a roll call?
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepak,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
No.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
I'm going to be consistent with the wishes of my constituents here in Ward 6 and vote no.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 5 in favor, 2 opposed.
Okay.
Hold up.
What? Okay. So that's going to the planning board, and I just, again, want to reiterate that in order to change zoning, it has to be a 5-2 vote. And that applies to a contract zone as well, correct, Jim?
Correct.
I got a question.
Okay.
How do I read? Okay, because I was voting. My understanding of my voting, it's like I didn't look at the time, the 12 o'clock p.m. I'm not in favor of that.
Well, ultimately, you'll have another chance to vote on it anyway, Flavia, because it'll come back to us.
Okay.
But this will at least give the planning board a chance to discuss that. And then if we want to make minor changes when it comes back to us, we can make changes.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
We haven't even discussed the budget yet. Moving on.
Do we all need to break for a cup of coffee before we start on the budget?
Oh, we still have some more things to check about.
Yeah, let's get to the budget first.
Let's power through these other things and then we'll take a break before we start the budget. So resolution 156-2021.
Resolution providing for approval of Purdue Farmer Chapter 11 restructuring plan.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I think that was a second from Tom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any discussion on this item? Steve?
Can't hear you, Steve.
The city solicitor is here with us tonight to provide some background on this case and what your vote on it tonight would mean.
Be brief, Bill.
I will. The city 3.5 years ago voted to join litigation against Purdue Pharma on the opioid crisis. And there have been extensive negotiations after Purdue Pharma filed for bankruptcy. They reached a tentative agreement on an overall settlement, which involves contributions from the Sackler family, as well as eventually the sale of the Purdue Pharma assets. How much money that's ultimately going to yield has not been determined, but there has to be a positive vote by the members of this suit for the bankruptcy court to be able to accept the proposed resolution. Even with an affirmative vote from you, this matter will come back to you at a later time, probably with an executive session, because there are going to be extensive negotiations on who gets how much of whatever the total amount of money is realized from this settlement. And our legal counsel in this matter, which has got multiple layers to it, have negotiated for several years, and they are recommending that we adopt it. I reviewed the background documents. I make the same recommendation.
Any questions from the council? Claude?
Just to be clear, Bill, the matter's in bankruptcy court, so it's extremely complicated litigation-wise. This puts us in the same boat with most of the other litigants. Is that correct?
Yes.
questions? Sarah, can we get a roll call on this?
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepak,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Bill.
Resolution 157-2021.
A resolution providing for acceptance of a gift from Colby College.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? Steve?
Just quickly for the benefit of the public, this is a gift of office chairs that were used by the council when they were holding their meetings at the Bill and Joan Alfond Main Street Commons. The college has decided to offer those as a gift to the council or the city for reuse in new council chambers.
They're very comfy. Some of you haven't got to experience them yet.
Or they were comfy.
Sarah, can we get a roll call on this?
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepak,
Yep.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
I will never say no to free stuff.
Order 158-2021.
An order providing for 2021 Burn Justice Assistant Grant.
Move to adopt.
Is there a second? Anyone?
Second.
Bueller? No, sorry.
I have a brief comment I'd like to make.
What's that? Did you say you have something?
Yes.
Go ahead, Bill.
I reviewed the agreement. There are some errors in it. I would propose you just make a simple amendment to say that the city solicitor is authorized to correct scrivener's errors in the interlocal agreement. And then I feel I'll be authorized to make the changes that are necessary. There are two paragraphs repeated, for example, and there are some a couple other minor errors.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? So this is a roll call on the amendment, which allows Bill to make correct scrivener's errors.
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepak,
Yep.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Move is amended.
Second.
And we'll take a roll call on.
Councilor Green has her hand up.
Oh, Counselor Green.
Thank you. Before we vote on this, I just wondered if we could get a summary of what the equipment is.
Mr. Chairman, that's why Chief Massey is with us.
Can we bring Chief Massey in?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Sure can.
The Justice Assistant Grant Program provides criminal justice funding to a number of local government entities, including obviously law enforcement. And there are several purpose areas that we can use that funding for, Counselor. You can use it for technology. They even added COVID-19 innovation programs in this year's funding. You can use it for forensic testing, such as DNA. So there's several purpose areas, and we're going to use it under the technology, which allows us to replace some of our aging radios in both our cruisers and then some in our server rooms, what we call base radios, which are about $6,000 a piece.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? We'll move to a roll call.
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepak,
Yep.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
Yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Moving on to ordinance.
Thank you, everyone.
159-2021.
Good job, Joe.
An ordinance providing for amendment to the administrative ordinance.
Move to adopt.
Well, second.
And Steve, this is just specifically for the requirement that the agendas for special meetings have to be hand delivered, right? Rick doesn't want the cops showing up at his house anymore.
That's correct. This is the Foss Amendment.
But you did
Still, if we don't get an acknowledgement back, what they call a return receipt in most email applications, then we will be forced to hand deliver to the residence of the counselor.
That's as I understand it, yes.
Okay. Any other discussion on this?
I support it because during the brown tail moth emergency meeting we had, the police officer literally came to my house while I was in the middle of the meeting.
Me too. Claude, did you have something?
But just as a matter of clarification on the receipt, is stuff that goes in the shared folder. If I click on that, does that give a receipt that I've opened it, or does it have to be something from my email? Or is this a technical thing that I'm just way out of bounds on?
Sarah, do you know the answer to that?
It's when we send it via email, when we send you that special meeting letter, we have the option to choose to select to get a notification when you get that email. So it's whenever we send an email and we choose that option that we want to get a notification back that you received that email from us.
Thank you.
Counselor Foss.
And to add on to that, because of my job, if you get a pop-up that says, do you want to send the read receipt, click yes, because if you click no, the cops will show up at your door, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So
okay, we'll move to a roll call on this.
Counselor Morris,
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira,
Yes.
Counselor Klepak,
Yeah.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Foss,
yes.
Counselor Frankie,
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Resolution 160-2021.
A resolution providing for adoption of remote meeting policy.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion on this one? I believe this is largely guided by legislation that was just passed by the state, and Bill has reviewed this along with Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
Just quickly, the legislature passed this law that allows municipalities to allows municipal officials to participate in public meetings remotely under certain conditions. And if that is allowed by the council or by the chair of the council, depending on how the policy reads, then the public is also allowed to participate remotely. On the other hand, if there are no members of the official body participating in remote status, then the law does not require the municipality to allow for remote participation by the public. The city solicitor has reviewed this on our behalf. He has edited it to customize it for Waterville. I did ask a question earlier and don't recall that I got a response on it. Bill, you had drafted one for the council and you had drafted one for the planning board. And I was wondering if they necessarily have to be separate policies, or can the council just adopt one policy that applies to all city meeting bodies?
It contemplates the public body adopting the policy, and the planning board has a legal status. I mean, its members are appointed by the council. It's empowered to make decisions. So I think it needs to be a separate policy if they wish to go that route, as opposed to the council deciding what the planning board's policy is going to be.
So the planning board will have to vote on their own policy.
Yep, that is correct. And what this, and of course, if we don't adopt a policy, then we go after July 30th, meetings are live with no opportunity to have remote participation. What this legislation recognizes is that I'll call it the Zoom technology, has allowed greater flexibility in conducting public meetings. We can all think of instances when it's been very difficult for a counselor to be able to attend. And if the counselor was out of state, that counselor did not participate. With the adoption of this policy, if a counselor is out of state, that counselor, say a February, April school vacation, the troubles we've had with quorum sometimes, that counselor can participate remotely with the permission of the chair. And also, if we have an urgent need for a meeting, that can be done by this remote participation policy. Or if there's some type of, let's say we had a horrible snowstorm, rather than having the council meeting canceled when we really need to conduct business, the council could conduct that remotely. So it gives us, it's a combination of the traditional way of meeting, but it gives us the added flexibility of using the fairly newly developed technology to conduct our business.
Just quickly, Bill, have you looked at this to see if state law as well as our ordinance is consistent with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act?
Meaning we have to, and this policy does have language, it says if somebody has a disability, we have to come up with a means for them to be able to attend remotely. So yes, it has taken that into account.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure. Very good question.
Councilor Green?
Yeah, as I understand it, then this policy would prevent a person from participating in the meeting remotely if there were no counselors participating remotely. But it sounds like, with the exception of someone who had a 504 disability, that they could get exception for. I mean, I think that what we've learned is the importance of being accessible remotely to anyone who wants to participate. So
I think it's left to our discretion, Rebecca. What Bill said is if there's no public official participating remotely, then it's up to the council whether they want to let the public participate remotely or not.
Correct.
We are not required at that point to allow them to participate remotely, but we do still have the option of allowing it.
All right. Well, I guess I just wanted to put in a plug for allowing people to participate remotely when they wish to do so. Thank you.
Steve?
A point of process, that may be something that you want to add to the beginning of the agenda to take a motion and a vote on whether or not to allow remote participation by the public. Just have it be a regular action.
Well, except I would think people would want to know in advance whether they're going to be allowed to participate remotely or not. So really, we should just have a policy and stick to it. And I would fall on Rebecca's side that unless it puts some undue burden on city staff, I'm fine with, even if we're all there in person, it'd be great if we can have a way for, especially like when we're dealing with developers from Portland or legal counsel from out of town or city staff who's sitting around for 2 hours through a meeting. In those cases, would want people to be able to participate remotely. Councillor Foss.
Sounds like Councillor Green's going to bring a resolution to the council next time. I'm just thinking, and I say that jokingly, but also seriously. I mean,
I'm happy to do so. Yeah.
You know, that's I think that flies all day long. You know, that we talked about that about midway through COVID. You know, we were realizing that this COVID, you know, like I've told downtown, let's make some silver lining out of this. This is an opportunity that we didn't know existed. Why not? So, and Chad is gonna need some sort of schedule. We can't just vote on it at the very beginning of a meeting and Chad just poof, everything happens. You know, so I think a resolution would be in order. So
yeah, and I would just recommend you talk to Sarah and Patty and Chad about the logistics of all of that before we commit ourselves to anything, because they're the ones who are going to have to do the extra work.
Sure. Okay. That's on my to-do list.
And I got disconnected in the middle of Councillor Green's question. Did it get answered in the meantime?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. I have nothing further to say.
Okay.
And she gets some extra work.
Steve?
I have one simple question of the solicitor. Since this policy has to be adopted before August 1st, once it's adopted, it's not cast in stone. It can be amended?
Yes.
Thank you.
So let's move to a roll call.
Councillor Morris?
Yes.
Councillor Oliveira?
Yes.
Councillor Klepak?
Yeah.
Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Foss?
Yes.
Councillor Frankie?
Yes.
Councillor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Chair, I officially would ask that we go into recess for 5 minutes before we get into the next resolution.
Works for me. We'll reconvene at 9:20.
And I think I will be signing off since you're going into the budget, and I don't believe that involves me in any way, shape, or form.
I don't know. We might have some legal questions, Bill.
Are you serious?
No.
Are you just okay.
We'll email you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good to see you all.
Now the real fun. Order 161-2021.
An order providing for appropriation of municipal and school operating budgets for the period of July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Steve, you want to summarize where we're at here? You're muted. Just have the dog hit the space bar.
My companion.
Have a new CMPD.
The budget order that you see before you is in detail a reflection of the budget that you've been working on, and the one that was most recently presented to the council, shared in the shared space that we have. It's the file that ends with the letter F to indicate the sixth version of this version of the budget. And as you all know, there have been many, many changes that we've gone through. What I can say about this, rather than going through all the detail of how the numbers are broken out, this is just a traditional format. All the detail is taken from the budget that you've been discussing. However, the school department does not yet have its final numbers. It doesn't expect them until Friday. So when this matter comes back before you, I anticipate that the school budget numbers will be different. Although I'm informed by the superintendent that because of actions that the school board plans, that there will be an equal expense offset to the revenue that they receive coming from the state as a result of the COVID distribution.
I guess I would just say counselors should, if you have any issue with the idea that the school is going to take the extra school subsidy and spend it, now is the time to bring that up so that the school is aware that we have concerns with that before they actually vote on anything. So perhaps we should take that item up first. If anybody wants to talk about the school's plans to take the additional school subsidy and spend the money, I don't know exactly. I think mostly they're looking at hiring staff, is what I've been told. But Councilor Frankie?
Let's see. I'm not muted. Oh, okay. Yes. That was what I was going to ask the city manager is if his understanding was that the school is planning to spend everything that they're getting in terms of additional money. And then the second question is, will we get a report on how the school is spending that additional money when their numbers come in at the end of the week?
I anticipate that we will get a modified budget from them, like the one-page detail that we saw before, that will have those changes in it, reflecting a different total of expenses and revenues, but not a different bottom line insofar as what they are asking the city to provide via tax levy.
Councilor Klepak.
And so the money, the subsidy that we're talking about, is this the same $6.2 million? That's an entirely different thing.
Yeah, this is, I believe the state had been funding school subsidy at 52.5% prior to the approval of this budget, and they upped it to 55%. Which I can't tell you what that means in terms of dollars. If I had to guess, I'm not even going to guess.
No, don't.
So yes, this is the additional school subsidy. It has nothing to do with COVID or any of that. This is money the voters of the state voted years ago to fund education at 55%, and I think this is the first time in history they've actually done it.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Councilor Foss.
Steve, I've seen scuttlebutt on social media and all that, and I'd like some clarity to that the school system is getting 11 million in COVID, and that they were planning on building the addition to the junior high with that 11 million. Can you speak to that?
Not officially, but I don't think that's the right number, although I think that's their intent.
Okay, I'd like to see some clarity to that. Not this time. Just
I think the discussion is to use $6 million to build it.
There's a public forum on Thursday around this issue at 6:00.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody has all the answers right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
Yeah, what are the numbers that they're waiting to finalize exactly?
I think the state just hasn't told them exactly what the 55% means. So they just don't have that final number of what because 55% doesn't mean 55% of our budget. It means 55% of education statewide. So I think it's a very complicated formula to pin down exactly what that means for Waterville.
Right, but what I'm hearing is that they will come up with a new budget which may have some additional items in it, which will be funded from that additional money.
Yep.
Yeah.
It shouldn't make any difference on what they're asking from us in terms of tax dollars.
Mm-hmm. I would, it would be helpful to have something more than a line item to explain what the expense is and how it will benefit the children. I mean, I get that, there are lots of expenses that the schools had to bear with COVID and all that funding is going to that, and that's all well and good. But I think it's important for the public to know, especially as Councillor Foss mentioned, with the pretty high profile news of a $6 million building being built. So that's all I had on that.
Is there any further discussion around just the school portion? And so obviously I don't want, we're supposed to take a first vote tonight and we were hoping to have, final numbers, which obviously we don't. And so I don't want people to get too caught up. We're going to have to take a second vote. So I'm hoping that, after some more discussion, we can, I understand we'll have to take a first vote without having final numbers in there. But we will have a chance to get some clarity between now and the next meeting. And if for some reason at the next meeting we're not comfortable with where we are, we can always table it at that point if necessary. And with that, I'll go to Councilor Frankie.
Just to jump ahead, the final version shows almost no change or very little change in I think 12 out of the 17 departments of the city. And the other changes that have been proposed are not a great deal. In other words, most of what the manager has proposed, we've already been over in our meetings, and it looks to me like we're at the point where we should go ahead and take our first vote, and then we can argue about this little detail and that little detail over the next couple of weeks, and before we take a final vote.
Yes. So I mean, obviously we have positions we want to discuss and all of that, and we can certainly take some of that up tonight if we want to. This is going to be the first item or one of the top items on the next agenda. And I would just point out the only real major thing that changed between last week and this week is the revenue sharing number. We updated the forecast from 3.75% to 4.5%, and that allowed us to take all of the use of surplus out of the budget. So the budget as it currently sits includes zero use of surplus. It actually shows us putting, I think, $160,000 in the bank or something like that.
150.
And then we need to make a minor adjustment because we were having a hard time getting clarity on what happened with the homestead exemption. I think what they ultimately voted on was they're going to raise it 3% a year starting next year until they get to 100%. And we had put the 3% in this budget, so we'll have to take, which I think amounts to $35,000 to $40,000.
Yeah, low 30s, I believe.
Yeah, so we'll have to take that amount out before we take a final vote. But that's at this point, the only adjustment that needs to be made is that, and any other positions that we might want to put in or take out. Councilor Foss.
Steve, just a really quick recap on this budget as it's being presented. No new hires except for the 3 EMTs for the fire department, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the chair just explained that we've substantially lowered our removal of the extra funding coming out of the piggy bank.
Yes, that number went from 750,000 to zero.
Yeah, that's what I've been scouring for, was that 750 line. I didn't see it. So thank you, Chair, for explaining that. The 1.6 million in COVID that are coming our way, are those included in these final numbers?
No.
When that money lands, will that be in the next budget season, or will we be able to apply those funds to this budget season?
We got a report today that indicated that there are some pretty severe restrictions on the use of that money. As an example, we can't use it to create a rainy day fund, which had been our plan. So we're going to have a long discussion about how to use those funds within the restrictions that have been published. We have a 6-year window in which to spend it. We think that the number is going to be in the $1.6 million range. And there are a number of uses for the money that are being advocated by the federal government that once we have that in black and white, then I think that we should have a roundtable discussion about how to use that money, because there are a lot of different priorities within this council and the city administration, and not all of them can be addressed by the funding that's coming.
We would bring those proposals back up for a vote down the road in January. Am I correct in saying that?
I think the money is going to be dispersed in August, and we'll have better guidance from the state at that point about exactly what we can and can't use it for. Some of the bigger municipalities that got a bigger pot of money, some of them have already gotten some of that money. And so they probably have a little more clarity on exactly what we can and can't do with it. And one of the things we can do with it is use it to replace lost revenue. Exactly what that means, I don't know. Because some of the other cities, the article that I sent out to you says that some of the other towns have allocated some of that money to replace lost revenue. What they're calling lost revenue, I don't know. I mean, for example, we may have raised taxes last year if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. I don't know. And does that count as lost revenue? So I think we need more clarity on some of that stuff. I think as much as possible, we would try to spend it on things that are in this budget if we can. so that we can turn around and bank the money that we had budgeted instead, as much as possible. But it's still not exactly clear what we may or may not be able to use that for in our current budget.
But in saying that, that would be budgetary spending, which would have to be a January vote. Am I correct in saying that? If we're going to apply it to budgetary items, like unlike paving Western Avenue, okay?
There will probably, yes, I think there will need to be some sort of a vote to allocate how we spend that money. Yes. Yeah.
You can amend the budget at any time, can't you?
Not the way I understand it. I understand that now, and then 6 months from now is the way I've always understood it.
That I couldn't tell you honestly, Rick.
Okay.
We've never actually tried.
Hence why I'm bringing it up. You know, if you know, I don't want to spend the money today, but when the 1.6 lands, you know, let's figure out what's best for everybody and go from there. I want to know what I'm voting on tonight, and what numbers are actually included in it, and then go from there.
So yes, there is no COVID money in this budget at this point.
Steve, can you find out for the next budget meeting, the absolute on every 6 months? We can revote the budget if need to.
Already wrote it down.
Thank you.
Councillor Green.
So just really quickly, the expenses for a new meeting place, are they in this budget?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then I just wanted to advocate for a couple of the positions that are not in the budget. In particular on the code enforcement officer and the full funding of the city planner. These areas are priorities for the housing committee that's been meeting, and I sent you a written recommendation from that body, but we really feel that it's important that an investment is made in those areas. So I don't know if I can move that as an amendment at this point, but if so, I would do that.
You certainly can if you want, if we want to have that discussion now.
I would actually move that, move to adopt all the positions that are on the list that Steve provided of staff additions, with the exception at this point of the assistant city manager, because the other positions add up to basically with the surplus that we're looking at.
I would maybe make the recommendation, Rebecca, that we take these up one at a time.
Okay, that's fine too.
So which one would you like to move first?
I would move the code enforcement officer first.
I'll second that.
Do you want to fund it for the entire year, or do you want to have them start in January?
Yes, that's a good question.
Well, I'm sorry, Rebecca, I don't mean to jump in.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, we're already in July. By the time they advertise and hire somebody, I mean, we're looking at September, so it'll be, you know, we would pay 9 months maybe salary versus 12. Mm-hmm. So I think in speaking with Dan, and, you know, following a current case in which, you know, he's had to go out and do some inspections on some rentals, and, you know, like, people rent apartment buildings that don't live in Waterville or even the state, that are, you know, very almost uninhabitable, and to work with the people that are renting them, you know, they really don't. They have nowhere to go. But you can go to the city, you know, the code enforcement officer, and have them come down and take a look, just, you know, verify that, you know, the things are safe, and, you know, they're up to code. We do have a property maintenance ordinance that covers both inside and outside of the structure. So, I would encourage people that are living in places that, they maybe question a little bit, take a review of that. And if there's any issue and your landlord's not working with you, then reach out to code enforcement to have them come down and actually do a walkthrough and see what what you're dealing with. In speaking to Dan, he is way overworked. He is putting in 10 to 15 hours, above and beyond what he's supposed to be doing, from home. It's starting to take a toll, I think, on the family life, and I think that, he's going to get to a point where he's going to get burnt out and he's going to make a mistake somewhere. And I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know if there's going to be, there's a cost to him making a mistake somewhere. But I think we have the opportunity here to, provide him with another person and alleviate, a lot of that. And so I'm definitely in favor of, adding this code enforcement position in.
Before I go to Claude, Steve, do you just have that number? What is the another full-time code enforcement person? How much exactly is that for the whole year?
That's 93,000.
I want a point of order.
Okay.
We're still looking for the motion to get clarified and a seconded before we get into discussion.
Well, there was a motion in a second. So
there was half a motion from what I understood. We're talking about funding for full year or half year.
I'm going to, based on what Mike just said, I'm going to offer that we hire the position as soon as we can find a person.
So for a full year.
Yeah, full year.
And Mike, you're good with your second on that?
Yeah, I'm absolutely good, because regardless, we're not going to pay him for a full year because we're already in July and that's when he would start normally. So we're not going to pay this person for a full year anyway. So I would rather, him look to find the right person and take that time to do it. And if he finds them in August, great. If he finds them in September, great. But find the right person and let that person be able to start as soon as possible versus waiting until January.
And you said $90,000, Steve, is that what I heard?
93 for a full year.
Councilor Frankie?
Now, I've been looking at a lot of different numbers, Steve, but I think at one point you indicated that there was an increase in revenue from electrical permits. Am I that just something wishful thinking on my part, or is that something that actually is in one of the memos?
It's in one of the versions of the budget. It's been in the last several versions. If we look under code enforcement, it's a departmental revenue, and the electrical permits and the building permits lines 17 and 18 have been increased, but not as much as I had hoped. And I don't recall what the number is, but I believe it's in the range of $20,000 to $30,000 more.
Okay, thank you. I knew I'd seen that in there somewhere.
It's been a lot of numbers, Claude. I agree with
that. A lot of numbers.
Councilor Green.
So on the positions added page, this code enforcement officer position is booked at 50% levy funded and 50% fee funded.
Yes.
That's based on projections of what this person would be able to, additional fines, presumably.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you look at the two fees, well, the total revenue for the department is $106,500. So, roughly speaking, both positions would be 50% fee funded and 50% levy funded.
Okay.
Well, and I'll just chime in here. This is probably the number one complaint that I've heard from people over the years is our lack of adequate code enforcement. And sometimes we're penny wise and pound foolish. And when we let properties deteriorate by not properly enforcing codes, it ends up costing us tax revenue in the long run because it not only drags down the value of that property, but the things that surround it as we let them deteriorate. So I'm in support of this position. Is there anyone else that wants to speak? So we'll move to a roll call, and this is on the amendment to fund an additional code enforcement officer for an entire year, for the entire budget year. So to hire them as soon as possible. Oh, I think we got somebody from the public who's got their hand up. Can you bring Michael Mosley in, Sarah?
Yes.
So I just wanted to make the comment that as a member of the public who has dealt with a lot of people going through the current housing crisis, as well as my own issues with code enforcement and my landlord, not just adding a code enforcement officer, but trying to figure out some way to protect renters when they want to go to code enforcement would be a great thing to see from the city council right now. Because I spoke to a homeless vet the other day who he wound up homeless because he called code enforcement. You also have people in your own like public housing projects that won't go to code enforcement or won't get any maintenance because they actually think that they'll be retaliated against, which is a legitimate concern. So I am all for adding the code enforcement officer, but if we could do something for the renters who actually want to use that, that'd be great.
Okay.
I'm sure that's a conversation the housing committee is having. And if not, I'm sure Rebecca would be happy to make that part of the conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to go to Claude, but can we also bring Anna Holdner in?
I just want to thank Michael for speaking up about improving our treatment of the housing in town. I think the first step is to put on the additional code enforcement. And then you're right, Eric, it's a conversation that I really think we need to have. I think that, again, doing it through the housing committee is the appropriate venue. But that's, I think, a direction that we really ought to move in.
And with that, we'll go to Anna.
Just for clarification, is this for a part-time code enforcement officer or a full-time?
Full-time.
All right, sounds good. I know I've already spoken with Rebecca about some of the concerns down here in the South End neighborhood. As far as there used to be multiple full-time code enforcement officers, and honestly, some of the housing issues that we have down here, as far as the inadequate housing, could hopefully start getting addressed with a full-time. So I encourage all of you to hear that and to be open to supporting this. Thank you.
Any other discussion about the amendment to fund the code enforcement officer? All right, we'll move to a roll call on the amendment.
Councillor Morris?
Yes.
Councillor Oliveira?
Yes.
Councillor Klepek?
Yeah.
Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Foss?
Yes.
Councillor Frankie?
Yes.
Councillor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
And then someone will need to move as amended.
Move as amended.
Second.
Second. Was that a second from somebody? Sorry.
Yeah.
Tom said second.
I need you to be more formal, Tom.
Second.
Button up that button. Okay, so moving back to the discussion, do we want to discuss any of the other positions before we take a vote on a first vote on the budget? Is there any other amendments people want to offer? Councilor Green.
I will also make an amendment. I will move an amendment to increase the planning director to full-time.
Is there a second on that?
I second that.
And Steve, do you have the cost on that?
Yes, it's another $57,000. And that's fully loaded, and I don't expect that it's going to be the add-ons will be that much. The benefits.
And I would just comment on this one. It's pretty unusual to have a part-time planner, and I highly doubt the next person we have in that position would be part-time anyway. So, at some point, this position's going to have to move to full-time. So I guess the question is, do we do it now, or do we wait until, our next hire in that position? So, Councilor Frankie?
Well, my question would be, has there been any discussion with Ms. Beveridge, the current city planner, about changing it to full-time?
Steve?
Yes, that's why it's here. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give a little bit of background as to why I put this on this list. We're facing a lot of change in the planning department and the processes with respect to the planning board. You dealt with it for an hour and a half tonight. And we're going to need robust planning staff to be able to deal with that. We're also looking at the comprehensive plan and economic development strategy and a reconsideration of the zoning ordinance over the next year to 2 years. And that's not something that we can handle with a part-time planning department. As for background, the last time I worked in a municipality that had less than a full-time planner was in a municipality of 5,000 people back in the 1970s. This is unheard of in this day and age for an urban environment such as Waterville to have a half-time planner, and that's the only planning function that we have.
Any other comments from the council on this one, or anyone from the public if they want to put their hand up?
I'm in support. I think this makes sense. And if, regardless of whether Ann's up for, going full time, I think it's important that, then that's another conversation. But I think, Steve, you outlined it perfectly. I think we've got a lot of things going on that I think we do, having a full-time person is warranted in this situation. So yeah, I'm certainly in support of adding this or making this position full-time.
Councilor Frankie?
Just quickly, in terms of changing the cost side of the budget, will this require us to dip into the surplus funds that we've decided that we didn't need this year?
So far, no. If we get another position beyond this one, yes.
If I can add just one other thing by way of bolstering the planning operation and the code enforcement operation, I think most of you know, and if you don't, I want you to know that I've moved the code enforcement office over to the fire department so that it can work hand in hand with the fire code enforcement effort and the fire inspection effort. And Chief Essler has been very accommodating to be able to supplement the code enforcement effort to the extent that fire code applies. and I expect that we're going to see joint inspections being made in the not too distant future. As a result, the office that the code enforcement department was in at City Hall is now going to be occupied by the planning department, which heretofore has been in a little wedge of space about 6 feet wide, tucked in between the two offices of the assessing department.
And I would also say, Claude, that I think some portion of both the code enforcement officer and the increased planning department, I think, can be paid for with TIF funds. We have to look at what's left available. But we are going to see another influx of TIF funds when some of these Colby projects wrap up downtown. And so some portion of those positions can be paid for with TIF funds, which wouldn't affect the tax levy. And we'll have to really dig into that between now and the next meeting to have some good answers on that part of it for you.
And let me clarify your response to Councillor Frankie, Mr. Chairman. If you're all looking at the FY22 budget positions added page and the recommended by the city manager section of that page, if you look at the far right-hand column, that reflects the cost of the positions that would be funded by the tax levy. The two positions that, the one you voted on and the one we're talking about now, total a tax levy impact of $77,000. We were working with a surplus of $150,000 before we started this conversation.
Councilor Green?
Yeah, just a clarification. All of these positions are new except for the planning director is an increase. So
correct.
Is the amount we're looking at on the loaded cost, is that the amount of the increase or the total?
In the planning director, that's the amount of the increase.
Okay.
It's effectively double what it is now, what the cost is now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor DeBrito? Is DeBrito now, right?
Yay! Yeah. Question. So the 57, that's the increase on top of it. Is that correct? Just to clarify that.
The 57?
Yeah, you said $50,000 for the planning director.
The increase, taking the planning director from half-time to full-time, will cost another $65,000 total, 30 of which would come from the tax levy.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Foss?
This is year-over-year cost additions, just saying.
Anybody else? Okay, we're going to move to a vote on taking the city planner from part-time to full-time.
Councilor Morris?
Yes.
Councilor Oliveira?
Yes.
Councilor Klepak?
You're muted.
I thought I said yes. Yeah.
We didn't hear you.
Councilor Green?
Yes.
Councilor Foss?
No.
Councilor Frankie?
Yes.
Councilor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 6 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you.
And somebody going to move as amended?
Move as amended.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other amendments we want to offer tonight? Councilor Klepak.
So, Steve, I have a question, not on a topic anybody wants to talk about, but where in this budget would money that the city would use to address the brown-tail moth problem that is impending, where would I find that money?
Let me check to make sure I'm right before I say so.
Mm-hmm. While you're looking, I'll just tell the council that I have been continuing my investigation into this issue. And the worst outbreak that Waterville has seen for this happened back between 1910 and 1920, that decade. And in the year 1914 alone, the city spent in inflation-adjusted dollars almost $64,000. In the month of March, it was 76% of its operational budget. In April of 1914, it was 99% of the city's operational budget, then 87% in May, tapering to 35% in June. And I've also been looking at the population dynamics of the infestation that happened back then, and as well as the population dynamics of the infestation that's happened here in the state since 2016. And I'm telling you what, it is going to be really nasty next year. If we don't take this problem seriously, we are going to have a real world of pain, and we're going to pay for it one way or another. I think being proactive, I mean, it's not even really proactive. The problem is here. Anybody who goes anywhere in town and looks at any external light during the day, right now you'll see thousands of these brown-tailed moths clustered around them during the day. If we don't really come up with a strategy for dealing with this, at least across the city, if not partnering with other municipalities in the region, we are not going to have a happy citizenry next summer. There's going to be a real health impact, and we're going to see lots of trees die in the city that we don't want to see die, but they will. So that's my warning, and I'd like to find some money in this budget to be able to correctly address this problem. It needs to happen over the winter.
There's $5,000 in here. I can't put my finger on it right now. Like was said, there's a lot of numbers here, but I recall putting $5,000 in here. I have no idea if that's enough.
And certainly, Tom, if there's a case where we declare, we did this with COVID. We declared an emergency and allocated, I think it was $150,000 immediately to deal with the emergency.
Yeah.
So, in lieu of having a real plan at this point, and I don't know what can be worked out between now and the next budget meeting, but just putting a number that we pull out of thin air might not be the best course of action.
Oh, I can give you a very detailed course of action. I can tell you in detail what the city should be doing. Month by month between now and this time next year, I can give you very detailed description of each of the steps that should be taken, and a rough estimate of what those are going to be. Those are going to cost outside of bidding for services, or whether we do it in house. I don't know if the council wants to hear it, but I have a long presentation that talks all about this in great detail.
I would say that one for the
we all would like to hear that, Tom, but we're on the budget right now. So may I suggest that you send us a memo detailing your plan so that we can then have a discussion at maybe the next meeting.
Yeah, I was simply asking to know what is currently in the budget. Because I wasn't able to really find that item.
I can't find it either right now, but it's in here. I know it is. Mm-hmm. It's in one of the sidebar notes that you don't see in what's in the shared space. So I have to look back into the budget file to find it, and I'll send that information to you.
But you're absolutely right, Tom. We need to do whatever we can get the ball rolling now, so that we're not caught flat-footed in the future.
It's going to be a geometric explosion next year if we don't really act over the winter months here.
Councilor Foss.
Did Councilor Green have any more additions that she wanted to propose?
No, thank you.
Then I would like to propose an amendment myself. We have now officially spent an additional $130,000, and in good standing with the taxpayers of Waterville, I would propose that we lower the mill rate by, I believe, 0.2 mill rate at this point would equal out the additional $130,000 of spending. So that's my official amendment.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
I'll start the discussion on that one. I mean, one, I think I didn't want to get into it tonight, but I think we probably are going to discuss a couple of the other positions next week. And I would just caution, I understand the sentiment, but we do have the reval pending. And I think we're going to want to have as much money in the bank to soften that blow as possible when it comes. So lowering taxes now to know that most people's bill is going to go up next year, I'm not sure is the wisest course of action. I would be more inclined to say we should bank that money and hold it in a fund to offset the effects of the reval when it happens. I have the spreadsheet that Paula Castangwe did 2 or 3 months ago. I think honestly the problem is only getting worse. And so I could share that with you guys. I mean, some people's taxes are going to go up 10 to 20%. And so we're likely going to want to hold the mill rate, maybe even an entire mill below where it really should be when the reval happens in order to soften the blow on residents. And so we're going to need to plan for having $770,000 in the bank if we want to do that. And we're going to have to probably do that. You know, it's going to be near a mill the first year and then probably half a mill lower than where it should be the second year. And, you know, it might even go into a third year just so people don't all of a sudden see a big jump in their taxes. So I guess at that point, it's just kind of a philosophical discussion. You know, do we give them a break now or do we hang on to the money and give them a break later? Right now, commercial entities are footing a higher portion of the tax bill than they will after we do a reval, because that's what's going to happen is that the tax base is going to shift from commercial to residential even more than it did the last time around. And so in some ways, it's more prudent to keep the mill rate where it is now so that more of those funds are coming from the commercial entities, you know, up until the point where we do the reval. It's not a huge amount of money, but it is something. So, I mean, I guess that's just my caution on lowering the mill rate. And plus, I would say we are going to have a discussion about some of these other positions. So maybe we should have those. I didn't want to do it tonight just because of the late hour, but maybe we should have those discussions first before we decide if we're going to lower the mill rate or not. And I'll go back to Councilor Foss to respond to that.
I've either been on the council or watching the council for 3 years, and for the last 3 years, we've proposed everything from $0.5 million up to $0.5 million up, and we keep saying cost, and re-eval and all that. Nobody's ever said to start lowering, and yet we just voted in $130,000 worth of brand new spending year over year. So at some point, we either have to put the brakes on our own spending, which I've said time and time again, or we need to figure out what we're doing wrong, because we're trying to bring more people in to live in Waterville. We're trying to attract new business to up the commercial side of the spectrum, and yet we keep talking about upping our taxes. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't want to go to a place that's going to continually, excuse me, there's a fly in here, continually, no, I'm not smacking my own self in my own head. You know, we talk about trying to attract more and more people, newer businesses to town. We can't do it with increased taxes. I just watched where I bought property over in Winslow do a $2 million increase. you can't do that and attract people, especially with what's been going on with COVID and everybody being laid off. If the city of Waterville has the ability to spend $130,000 so far in additional spending, then we should also find it in our wallets to hand back to the taxpayers, 0.2%, which is around $130,000. If I'm mistaken, Steve, please correct me.
You're not.
That's if we're going to spend to grow the city, we should also spend to take care of the taxpayers, which are funding the city. So that's where I'll leave that.
And I agree with you, Rick. In my mind, we're going to do that after the reval. Like, that's what I'm planning for is the consistency. So I'll go to Councillor Frankie and then to Councillor Green.
Well, I support Councillor Foss on this one. We had an increase in tax revenue due to the new building, the new hotel that Colby built, as well as some other places where there has been an increase in property value. We also have received an increase in revenue sharing from the state, and we've reached back into our TIF account to find funds that we have not spent in past years. So what it boils down to is that while we've increased the cost of city government, we've also found places to pay for those increases. And in that regard, the city manager and the finance committee are to be applauded for really working incredibly hard to make this budget end up where it's at. However, with I agree with Councillor Foss that if we've got a little extra, let's let the taxpayers know that we've heard their complaints about the mill rate and that we're going to try to do a little something about it.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, so I would just say that it's important when we're thinking about increases that we've received from revenue sharing and other TIF revenues, et cetera, that we're catching up from a decade of being underfunded. And the positions that we're funding that we voted on to fund today, we're talking about an impact on the levy of $76,000, which still gives us a surplus. And what our return on that investment is going to be a city where where neighborhoods are actually addressed when there are situations of blight, and it's going to make a more attractive place for people to move. The city planner position will help with delivering on our comprehensive plan, which, if you read through it, about half of the items on there call for the responsibility of the city planner, but she can't do that at halftime. So we really need to, as Councillor Thomas has said, I forget what it is, penny wise, and you don't want to be penny wise.
Sound foolish. Yes.
Sorry, the hour is late, but yeah, so it's time to invest and not see that as spending so much as, investment in making Waterville a place that will attract people. And yes, we will get to the mill rate. And finally, I want to say, we've just heard about a very important new expense that we have that we don't have budgeted for. So I think that we need to address, we need to see Councillor Kleepock's report and consider that in terms of our spending priorities. And the other final thing is that we also have this big question mark around $1.6 million And so there are a lot of questions still to be asked. I think it is too early to lower the mill rate, as much as I approve of that as a goal at some point.
Anybody else? And this is on Councilor Frankie. You're muted, Claude.
Just a quick point of order. Under the new charter, we have to pass the budget with a 2/3 vote. So my question is, do we need to pass amendments by a 2/3 vote?
I don't believe so. I think it's just whatever ends up in the budget. So once it's amended, if there's an amendment that goes in there and it means only 4 people vote for it for the final budget, then that would mean it doesn't go through. But if the amendment's in there and then 5 people say, yes, I approve of the entire package, then I think it's just the entire budget. But we can get clarification for you on that for sure.
Yeah, Steve, would you ask Bill Lee to clarify that for us before we get too far down the road on these on the nitty gritty of the final budget?
Will do.
Okay, so we're going to move to a vote. This is on Rick's amendment to lower the mill rate by 0.2.
Councilor Morris,
No.
Councilor Oliveira,
No.
Councilor Klepak,
Sorry, Rick. No.
Councilor Green,
No.
Councilor Foss,
Yes.
Councilor Frankie,
Yes.
Councilor Thomas.
No.
Vote is 2 in favor, 5 opposed.
Okay, so the amendment fails. So we're back to where we were, voting on discussing the budget with the previous amendments that have already been passed. Is there any other amendments anyone wants to offer tonight? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to a roll call. This is the first vote on the budget. It includes the new code enforcement position, and it includes increasing the city planner to full-time. And that's the only changes that have been made tonight. So
Councilor Morris,
Yes.
Councilor Oliveira,
Yes.
Councilor Klepak,
Yes.
Councilor Green,
Yes.
Councilor Foss,
No.
Councilor Frankie,
Yes, although I still agree with you, Rick.
Okay.
Councilor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 6 in favor, 1 opposed.
All right. Is there any counselor updates? Anyone from the public have any community notes? Now's the time to raise your hand. I don't see any hands going up. Is that it? I think we're done. Is there a motion to adjourn?
There is a motion to adjourn.
Can we find something else to talk about for another hour?
No.
We can call Tom and talk about brown tail moths.
There you go. He's all in. Have a
You
good
can't
night.
do that in an hour.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.